Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nora's Retail Up Live webinar series. My name is Nicola Clement. I am the General Manager for Omni Experience at Myer and also on the advisory board for Nora. I am your host for today. We've got some great guests with us, and today's session is the last episode in our three-part Digital Growth Hacks webinar trilogy, all about maximising your media ad spends. Before I get into introducing our wonderful panelists today, I just want to touch on a bit of housekeeping. So we have approximately 45 minutes of discussion with our panel, and then we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of the session if we have time. So the key thing is to remember that you are welcome to ask questions at any time. Please use the chat function in Zoom, and we'll make sure we come back to those at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Laura first to introduce yourself, and then we'll move through the rest of the panelists.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura, and I'm a sales director with Crimtan. For those who don't know us, we're programmatic experts that specialise in lifecycle marketing, and we help retailers to not only drive sales, but also drive new customers, customer lifetime value, and incremental revenue.
Great. Bronte.
Hi everyone, I'm Bronte. I work for Miss Amara as the Digital Growth Marketing Manager. Miss Amara is an e-commerce business that sells rugs online. We do around 19 million revenue a year. And last year I was at Super Retail Group working on the BCF brand. So much bigger company with bigger budgets. So it's nice to see the difference transitioning from a large company to a small company.
Awesome. And James.
Hi, I'm James Perry, Head of Digital Media Data and Client Services at WooliesX, who are sort of the digital and innovation arm of Woolworths Group. So.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us. We also have Jessica, who'll be joining with us shortly. Unfortunately, she's had a slight electricity issue. She's Country Manager for Australia and New Zealand from Integral Ad Services, also known as IAS. Well, we'll get started if everyone's happy to kick on. So the first thing we wanted to sort of touch on is that research from Australia Post has revealed that more than 80% of Australians shopped online last year, driving the online share of retail market to a record 19.3%. For people like me who've been working in online retail for a very long time, it's amazing to see that amount of growth. But in addition, 1.4 million super shoppers who purchase goods online more than once a week. They buy across 41 retailers a year. Consumers have plenty of choice when it comes to buying online, and as marketers, we all know how this has driven up the cost of advertising. Given all of these, our aim today is to discuss and share our thoughts on how we can maximise our media ads budgets to reach your target audiences in the most efficient manner. So Laura, we're going to start with you if that's okay. Crimtan specialises in intelligent lifecycle marketing. Tell us more about what steps Crimtan take in ensuring that your clients are maximising their media ad budgets.
Sure. So, as the research is telling us, more and more people are shopping online, and more regularly. But there's also more retailers competing for their attention, which is causing, advertising costs to rise. So it's really important to be as efficient as possible with your media spend. At Crimtan, there are 3 basic steps that we take for every campaign to ensure that we're maximising results for our partners. So the first one is we take a life cycle marketing approach. I think these days lots of advertising really focuses on retargeting, which is really important, but a life cycle approach is more holistic. So, a life cycle approach looks at the entire purchase journey rather than just focusing on someone who's expressed strong purchase intent by adding a product to their basket or viewing a product, and would probably convert anyway without further prompting, so it's a waste of impressions. So we split the life cycle into 3 different stages, including prospecting new customers, converting customers who have been to site but haven't yet converted, and also re-engaging existing customers. So all 3 stages require different approaches rather than the same blanket approach. We also tend to spend more budget on prospecting new customers because, if you just focus on retargeting, you're not really increasing your retargeting pool. And it's also a lot harder to convert a new customer than an existing customer. So once the customer's converted, then we kind of also look at growth strategies, which is often overlooked. So we look at ways we can cross-sell and upsell and drive repeat business and, increase average order value and drive incremental revenue. So the second thing that we do is we use dynamic creative optimization, which uses a single creative template that populates automatically based on audience behavior. So it kind of allows us to show individual customers creative that's most relevant to them, which will always increase performance. So, for example, if somebody has clicked on a Father's Day creative, once on site, they might spend their time looking at toys. So rather than kind of retargeting them with Father's Day creative, we'll show them creative around toys, which is kind of what they've expressed interest in. And the third thing that we do is also ensure that we are reaching real people in a brand safe environment. So, as a standard, we ensure that all our campaigns are fully compliant in terms of data privacy and legislation and, using the best programmatic practices as recommended by industry bodies like IAB. And we also work with third parties like Grapeshot and IAS, who are here today to ensure that every impression is served to an actual person in a brand safe environment.
Love that. Thanks, Laura. I definitely, that dynamic content optimization is so hugely valuable as a consumer, but also as a business to be able to have something that's that sophisticated. But Jessica is not with us. So James, you're in an interesting position where WooliesX covers so many brands. How do you and your team ensure that all brands are tackling media quality efficiently?
So, I think the key thing is like we have a huge part of what the business focuses on is our customer first, like where we're looking at understanding the customer and doing the right thing by the customer. And I think a big part of that then means that the first question is, where is the customer going to be? What media are they going to be going on and what are they consuming? So we can better understand, if you like, one of those ways of bringing that person into the conversation with Woolworths Group. I think we look at a top level, a lot of it's down to organizations. So we've on a top level, we've got like brand guidelines, policy on where we'll advertise and what we do. And then we use tools like IAS to help monitor those guidelines, look at the content around what we're doing, and then also to both plan our media and say, okay, here's where we want to be, but then also be able to look back and say, okay, here's where our ads ran, here's what we did, here's who we're talking to there. And then also making sure we're around content, the correct content to engage the customer in the way we want to. And then I think the last part of it is that as Woolworths, we're very fortunate because we can look at we have a big e-commerce presence. We can look at that customer journey and understand how that attribution piece comes together. And I think that the key thing for us is melding those things together then to have a good overall view of the customer and what they're doing and just make sure we're talking to them at the relevant points in their journey to hopefully buy Woolworths.
That's really good. Bronte, I'm going to cut across to you next. You've been in a bigger retail chain and now at Miss Amara, a medium-sized retailer. Does any of this change depending on the size of the brand?
Yes, absolutely. So a bigger company, you have a much wider target market. We are looking at building out a brand. In some way, you can build out a brand by getting visibility with the whole market. So you identify you are a brand person, you're not a brand person. That's part of the process of building that brand out. And that was absolutely the case for BCF. You were either a BCF person or you were not. And that made a very clear distinction. At Miss Amara, we have a more segmented target market, more focused, and we need to be because every dollar we spend has to have a good return on investment, ROI. It's really important that we are carefully analyzing our media selection to make sure we're getting the most efficient placements and we're actually achieving our goal of reaching the right person. So at the moment, my target market might be a 25 to 54-year-old woman in a top 30% income. And we run brand advertising through Meta and YouTube. Meta, it's quite easy. You're signed in. We know we're reaching the right person. On YouTube, you can find that other people in the household are using the device or watching the TV that you're signed in on. So we go down to the level we're looking at affinity, target market, even down to topics. So we don't want our ads shown in front of someone talking about video games because that might be someone younger in the household watching the connected TV. We will be looking at topics that are more relevant to people interested in interior design and things in more a luxury section, which is our target market. So our media selection objectives do differ based on where we are on the funnel. We do absolutely believe in bringing in new people into the funnel, but we're very careful about how we do it. We don't want to bring all leads in. We need to do it cost effectively. And we even get to the point where we're experimenting with AI. So we run a lot of campaigns in Meta from top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel remarketing. And we work on it manually because we, a smaller company, to find efficiencies. A lot of A/B testing of artwork and copy and creative, maybe not to the point where whole dynamic. We are with catalog, but we've brought in AI to see if we can find efficiencies that human cannot. We're experimenting that right now, and the initial stages are showing we can see up to 48% uplift in cost per result through using a little bit of AI. So yeah, that's how we're tackling it.
Really powerful. Great to hear. Jessica, welcome. Sorry that you had a few technical issues, but I just wondered, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much, and apologies. I'm glad that I finally got on. My name is Jessica Miles. I'm the country manager at Integral Ad Science across Australia and New Zealand, more commonly known as IAS. We work with marketers and brands and partners like Crimtan, and we ensure that advertisers are buying quality digital media. So this will positively impact media and marketing outcomes. And it does that by ensuring that the digital ads are seen by consumers in safe and suitable and relevant environments.
Amazing. Well, we had a bit of a pre-chat for a few questions before you joined, but one of the things that Laura touched on was media quality that you just mentioned then. And you're definitely the right person to share more about that. So are you able to explain in simple terms why a retailer should care about media quality, and how does that actually affect their advertising budgets?
Yeah, definitely. So digital media can be really challenging when you think about how expansive the digital environment is. There's billions of potential impressions, so it's not so easy to see your ad once it's live, and it's almost impossible to see it live in every environment that it may appear. So measuring media quality provides a safety net to ensure that your ad is appearing in a quality environment. So I'll touch on a bit what I mean by quality, because it is a really broad term. So if your advertising is appearing on quality digital media, you're buying ads that are on the screen, they're shown to real humans, your consumers, and are within a safe and suitable environment. If you are not buying quality media, you're actually paying for ads that are not on the screen or being shown to bots and not in the right environment. So let me put this into context of the advertising budget. For example, if you're paying for an ad that never appeared on the screen, that's like paying for a movie, but you're not allowed into the cinema. You're actually just sitting outside while the movie's playing. If you're paying for an ad that's shown to a bot rather than a human, well, actually those dollars are going to funding ad fraud inadvertently. And then if you're paying for an ad that is unsafe or unsuitable, it could actually cost money, as it can erode the value of your brand. So if you think of the worst article that has been written about your brand or your category, and then choosing to put your ad next to that, that's essentially what happens when your advertising budget is being spent on unsafe and unsuitable media. So this becomes an even greater need on platforms where there's user-generated content at a very large scale, and where safety in particular can be quite challenging. So I would say that media quality in a nutshell sets up your advertising for success, upon which you build your creative and your targeting strategies to drive better media and business outcomes.
Great. I thought it might be a good time to just then also talk to Bronte and then to James about your thoughts on media quality and relevance for your businesses. Do you want to start, Bronte?
Yeah, sure. So media quality, like I mentioned, is really important to us because we need to be very efficient with every dollar we spend. We do have different objectives to where we are on the funnel. So when we're doing top of the funnel, we're trying to make sure that we have an ad that's visible and the audience is engaging with it. So if this is an ad placement on the side of the screen and the person is not in that eye line of visibility, it's not of high value. If the pixel size is really small, if it's a pre-roll video on the bottom right-hand corner on sale, it's not of quality for us. So we're trying to make sure the audience actively engages when the objective is brand awareness. When we're looking at other parts of the funnel, we're looking at remarketing, we do a lot of display buying. We carefully audit with our partner all of the channels and placements we run. We will make sure that we're not just getting mistaken junk clicks when our ads appearing in apps for games. People are just trying to click to get away with and come through the site. That is not a click with intent. So we do actively audit and manually go through a lot of our campaigns to do this work. We are also doing holdout tests to prove how successful of providing incremental revenue that channel or campaign might be. So we've actually turned off remarketing in one market because we did not find it was of an incremental value. Another way we're doing that is through marketing mix modeling through open source, which is really exciting for us to get access to because it can be very expensive to run marketing mix modeling. We've been able to analyze all our spends in all these different channels from top to bottom of the funnel and measure the percentage impact it had. When the percentage impact was lower than our spend, then we're overspending on a channel that wasn't giving us incremental value over time. In the same respect, we found that there is channels that we weren't spending enough in that were providing higher value to us, like YouTube advertising. So we very much spend a lot of our time analyzing our campaigns, taking those savings and reinvesting in those that we are finding are providing value to us.
That's great. James, do you want to add anything else on media quality before we move on?
I'd say that there's a couple of different things in the way you approach it based on, you know, kind of what the business is doing or what you're doing. So say the way when I worked previously at Qantas, they would approach media is very different to the way we would do it at Woolworths, often using the same publishers, the same things like YouTube or Facebook, but kind of interacting in different ways in the way the brand is set up. So I think part of it is a brand decision based on comfort and a conversation within the business to get consensus on what we want to be doing, and especially when it comes to kind of your brand versus your performance style media that you're going to do. And then that influences how we'd work with someone like an IAS then to look at, say, okay, what media is suitable, what levels of measurability are we looking for, what are the key kind of drivers of activity. I think the second part is understanding what you're going to measure. I think the challenge with digital media is there's so many different measurables, you can often get lost in the numbers. Obviously, if someone from data science was here, they'd tell me I'm wrong, but my view would be that if a bit too much information can get a bit kind of disconcerting. And then I think it's that optimization and learning. It's like there's real-time things you can do in a campaign to change the channel mix, look at what you're doing, maybe spend more with publishers who are performing particularly well. But then it's the learnings from that and how we can apply that to the media mix. So, you know, we'll use various tools, we'll work with an IAS, we'll work with people like that to look at the kind of where campaigns performed, heat map it, decide where the opportunities lie, where we could have probably gone a bit harder, where we didn't perhaps see the levels of response we were looking for. But I think the key thing really with all this is every brand has a customer and you need to be focused on that customer first model. And so to do that, it's going to depend where you advertise, how you talk to people based on that brand and the KPIs that kind of sit around that. And then when you look at, say, something like a Woolworths, the challenge is we have a lot of different conversations going in market at any one time. So it's also trying to kind of keep a degree of structure around that. So, you know, the message doesn't get lost.
Great. Things to think about there. Thanks, James. So Laura, back to you. Media cost is on the rise. I think that's something that we're all very acutely aware of, but yet every other brand is asking for quality media. How is your team finding the right balance?
I think that, you know, media quality, or particularly, I guess, brand safety, means different things to different advertisers. And, you know, it can even kind of change on a campaign by campaign basis for the same advertiser. So we kind of really work with our advertisers on clear priorities for every single campaign. You know, if you've got a performance goal and you've got really stringent brand safety requirements, you know, how will that impact and what's more important? You know, I think often advertisers have multiple goals. So we just really kind of try and help them to understand the effects on the overall campaign output and help them to prioritize. You know, as well as a standard, we have brand safety measures in place, such as IAS integration across every campaign. You know, we've got a blacklist of sites as a standard and use negative keyword targeting. But, you know, again, it varies from client to client. So, you know, if you're a fast fashion brand that targets young women and really, you know, prioritizes, I guess, sales over brand safety, you still probably wouldn't want to appear around certain content, like, you know, maybe sexually explicit content. So our standard brand safety practices would cover that. But then, you know, if you kind of look at a luxury brand, you know, you'd really want to kind of up the brand safety, and we probably limit the environment that their ads appear into, you know, much more premium sites, regardless of, you know, whatever their goal is. But I think, you know, fundamentally, the biggest kind of advantage around programmatic and particularly dynamic creative is the ability to get more personal with your customers. So, you know, if you're kind of running a TVC during Christmas season, you know, this will give you a really high reach premium environment, but your messaging is going to be fairly generic. Whereas with programmatic, it gives you the opportunity to be more relevant to your audience, which is always, you know, going to resonate more regardless of whether it's a premium environment or not. So, you know, in a Christmas example, you know, you'll have a generic Christmas TVC potentially, but, you know, men and women shop very differently, or, you know, are looking for different things. So programmatically, you could serve different creatives to both, or, you know, change the call to action based on location. So, you know, maybe free delivery to a rural area, or add a countdown to remind consumers to purchase in time for Christmas, you know, delivery dates. And more importantly, you know, you can also kind of test the effectiveness of each variation. So, I mean, I think the point is ultimately, no matter what your brand safety kind of comfort level is, having personalized messaging will resonate more regardless of the environment that you appear in.
I love that flexibility and also that level of control and ability to change it up based on your business needs. That sounds great. Jessica, let's deep dive a little. Does media quality mean that we are sacrificing performance?
No. But if you take into consideration what Laura and what James said, a unique approach that you need to take. So buying quality media is going to cost more. But the reason why you want to buy quality media is because it generates better outcomes. And so let me deep dive into that a little bit. So if we're looking at baseline media quality, let's take viewability and fraud. If you are building a performance algorithm, for example, let's take a basic cost per acquisition formula, you know, that is calculating the total cost divided by the total new customers, for example. Generally, if you're looking at digital media, it's not taking into account viewability and fraud. So if you factor in viewability and fraud, and let's say only 25% of your total budget was actually shown to your consumer because the 75% was impacted by viewability and fraud, then that CPA calculation starts to go up. Now, if you can optimize towards viewable and fraud-free environments, then the advertising budget has more bandwidth to generate better outcomes, because essentially your ad is reaching more of your consumers. So if, for example, you improve your viewability and fraud by 50 or to 70%, you really have a greater chance of being effective. So whilst buying a viewable impression costs more, a viewable fraud-free impression costs more, what you really need to take into consideration is, well, how is that impacting my performance metrics when I'm looking at it through a lens of media quality, and factoring in the wastage that occurs when you aren't buying viewable and fraud-free. That is a very kind of simplified overview. Laura touched on brand safety. Brand safety is quite unique. It's definitely important. The reason why is because if you place your ad in an unsafe environment, it can generate negative impacts on your brand perception. And so when you're thinking about your advertising budget and how it's working for you, you want to generate positive brand equity. You don't want to generate negative brand value. And what we found out through one of our studies called The Power of Context is when you placed your ad in a safe and suitable environment, it drove favorability, memorability, and engagement. And that's really what we want to drive when we're spending our advertising budget, which is why when we're talking about, sacrificing performance, investing in a solid media quality framework that drives your ability, minimizes fraud, and ensures that the ad is in a safe and suitable environment, you are creating a baseline that enables your ads and your targeting and creative strategies on top of that to be more effective.
I love that term, the power of context. I think that's something I will keep for future conversations. But Laura, you previously mentioned media quality is one way, one of the many ways that we can maximize media ad spends. And we also touched a bit before on dynamic content optimization, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about how we can leverage to help with that. Do you mind giving us a bit more?
Sure. So there are 4 kind of key benefits that we talk about when discussing dynamic creative optimization. The first one is that it is more scalable. So when you run kind of a static ad campaign, you need to create each of your ads separately. So, you know, if you are running multiple promotions over Christmas or running a campaign in multiple markets in different languages to, you know, multiple audiences, you know, all in different sizes, you know, that would mean that you would potentially need to create thousands of different creative variables. Whereas with dynamic creative, all you need to do is create a single template, and all of the content, like, you know, any imagery, product, copy, call to action, will automatically populate based on the audience. So not only do you save time and money on production, but, you know, dynamic creative also makes it easier for you to scale your campaign because you can serve an unlimited number of variations from a single template. The second is also that, you know, it's more relevant. Like I said earlier, while brand safety and context is, you know, very important, having more relevant creative will make your advertising, you know, resonate more with your audience. You know, a recent study, you know, there's always studies, but, you know, a recent study found that 80% of consumers find ads to be irrelevant. You know, dynamic creative allows you to combine data and creative to provide a more kind of personalized and relevant experience to your customers, which, you know, always helps with performance. Dynamic creative also provides powerful insights. And I think this is something that is kind of often really overlooked, but is really valuable. You know, the ability to break down which images or products or call to actions generate more clicks or conversions, and being able to kind of optimize to that in real time really helps to maximize your budget, which leads to kind of our fourth point, which is DCO allows you to be more efficient. So not only does it allow you to optimize to the best performing creative, but also the most valuable customer. So if a customer has shown, you know, strong purchase intent and is likely to convert anyways, you know, rather than retargeting that user and wasting impressions, you can kind of use those impressions to move other users down the funnel or to target new users, but just kind of being able to target those audience buckets differently. So, you know, all of those benefits really help to ultimately maximize your ROI.
Sorry, love that. I really also think that those insights are quite powerful, and how you could even potentially leverage that across the rest of your digital environments and your website.
That's right.
On to you, James. As a retailer, there are obviously, we know, lots of conflicting priorities. Media quality historically has been done by external vendors. What do you think about bringing media quality in-house?
I think when you look at, say, things like media quality, there's always like, I think it depends how you look at it. If you're looking at, you could argue it's been done by external vendors when we work with agencies, but 9 times out of 10, they would probably be partnering with someone like IAS anyway. So in reality, if we look at what we're doing, we will partner with best in class to use that product internally. And then we'll also use it externally via the external partners who plan our campaigns, like the ad agencies that we work with. I think that the priorities will change based on the campaign goals and what we're trying to do. But, you know, also we as Woolworths will work with agencies. We also work with our internal teams to plan and execute media. But that measurement, the brand quality, the understanding the content and the context around which we're advertising are key regardless whichever channel we use to execute that. I think that the thing that we fixate, you know, you've got to fixate on really when it comes to technology. Woolworths, we're obviously expert in the retailing space. We're not expert in like the brand quality space. So I think for things like that, we'll always work with partners and use their expertise because that's a better use of our time and money, so we can concentrate on other stuff internally. And I also think the other challenge to it is that the brand does have to take responsibility though for what they're doing, but you're always better. I think that, you know, if you think about the publishing market, the reason why IAS can do what they can do is they have all the integrations with all the publishers that are out there. If we were going to do that ourselves, it might be possible, but it's going to be very, very difficult. Whereas someone like IAS will have an international network that we can leverage, you know, or including like international sites, local sites, you know, the bigger brands like your YouTubes, your Facebooks, your things like that, as well as your News Corps, 9, all the rest of it. But having that in one place and having the dashboards that allow us to report on that is really key to what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the things that I talk to my team about. Don't try and be great at everything, because you'll always end up average. So be clear on the things that you want to be great and focus in, and then partner with the best for the other services you need. So great. Thanks for that, James. Okay, Jessica, so how does it all work in the back end? Are we seeing more brands adopt and take ownership of their media quality?
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing a shift towards brands taking more ownership. And the reason why is to ensure greater transparency and control at the end of the day. The responsibility of the marketer does not change depending on how or who is executing on media quality. The marketer and the brand always have the ultimate responsibility when it comes to media quality, because the marketer knows their brand more intimately than anyone else. And at the end of the day, it's their budget. So what this means is that they can make the right decisions for their brand, especially when it comes to safety and suitability. James touched on how we work with Woolworths and also their agency. And for brands that are thinking of in-housing their media trading, it's actually a no-brainer to take media quality in-house as well, since they'll make those media decisions and execute on them as well. Brands that are partnering with their media agency can still definitely own the relationship, and we are seeing that and executing through their agency. And this is because it enables them to retain transparency and control over their media quality decisions. In addition, there are partners in market like Crimtan who took very early initiative to partner with us and ensure that their clients are able to invest in quality media. So there are many ways that marketers can plan and buy their quality media. But what is most important is that every marketer develops a framework or a baseline, as I mentioned before, for media quality, and that they execute on this in-house, or they do it in partnership with their media agency and platform partners. So communication is really key when it comes to media quality. Media quality technology is also universally accessible, and it's becoming increasingly automated every day. So this really makes it easier to apply, makes it easier to continually monitor and adjust media quality strategies to drive ultimately better outcomes.
Sounds great. Really feels like the technology has stepped up in recent years. I remember having to do that all very manually, showing my age, I think. Yeah, that's fantastic. So Bronte, over to you. Is this something that is considered at Miss Amara? What's the brand's strategy for media quality, if you're able to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have worked at a company that works with in media quality agencies, and just to see that transparency, which I absolutely agree on. At Miss Amara, we are doing most of our media buying in-house. We are working with a few smaller agencies and partners for certain channels. We absolutely take responsibility in-house to do the assessment of media quality ourselves. It's really important that we are constantly analyzing it to kind of see, are we getting the quality that we want? Sometimes it's a matter of, is it viewability? Is it the performance of it? We really kind of check all things. I've even got to the point where I've gone, I need to remove these sites. I need to remove these placements. I need to cap the spend on this device. I've even removed tablets. We've gotten really granular. It does sound a little bit of work involved, but the quality we get out of that is amazing. So we do spend a lot of time on that. We are also willing to pay a high CPM or CPC for quality traffic. We've had some partners push back, but the CPCs are rising. I said, that's okay. See this ROAS, the return on advertising spend? This is lifting nicely, and that's the objective of it. It's not to maximize my budget of the month and get the most amount of clicks. It's about to get clicks with intent to keep browsing, clicks with intent to purchase. So we do spend a lot of our time on that. As much as I spend on time on budgeting, we spend on making sure that budget has been spent effectively. When we spoke earlier about dynamic creative, we're not running that in-house through a platform, but we are doing a lot of multivariate testing. We're using some AI as well to kind of make sure we are getting the right message in front of the right person, particularly at that point in the journey. So we do really plan that out carefully. We don't want to be sending a message too early that's asking for a sale when we haven't really warmed up that lead. So that's part of it as well for us.
Great, thanks, Bronte. Laura, what are some tips you would give to brands when deciding which programmatic partner to work with that can help maximize their media ad spends?
We get asked this question a lot, kind of how do you decide on what programmatic partner to choose. You know, there are so many programmatic businesses that are out there, and it can be really confusing. I know I live and breathe it, and I still get confused. So, you know, there's kind of 4 key considerations when selecting a programmatic partner. The first one is their technological capabilities. So, you know, first of all, ask about their capabilities based on your requirements. So, you know, what channels do you want to work with? Do you want to work with display? Do you want to kind of access digital out of home or digital audio, or all 3? What are your data requirements? You know, what do you want to utilize your own audiences, or do you want third-party audiences? Do you have a large Safari audience that you want to target? You know, what are your creative requirements? Do you want to utilize dynamic creative? So, you know, once you understand all those things, be sure to work with a partner that has the right technology. The second is service and support. So, you know, with all the complexities around programmatic, it's really important to understand the type of support that you will be receiving. You know, at Crimtan, we've got traders, we've got creative teams, and, you know, data experts, account managers who you can lean on, you know, and all kind of help to get the most out of your programmatic campaign. Also, you know, how are they future-proofing? There's so many factors that impact digital marketing, you know, whether it's changes to data privacy legislation or technology updates like, you know, browsers and devices blocking third-party cookies, you know, and that's kind of ever-changing. So having a programmatic partner that is ready for these changes is instrumental. You know, ask partners if they have a solution for the upcoming data privacy legislation changes in Australia and how they target in a cookieless environment. And also, you know, I think Bronte touched on this, but are they transparent? You know, I would question that. I think, you know, digital media can be really, you know, murky. And I hear from a lot of our retail partners about their bad experiences with partners promising the world and not following through. So, you know, I think it's important to ask, you know, how are they ensuring that your ads are being viewed by real people in a brand safe environment? You know, do they work with partners such as IAS? You know, are they following best programmatic practices through IAB initiatives around media quality, attribution, transparency and insights? You know, and also what kind of reporting is being offered? You know, can you see where your ads have been served and what strategies are being used, and, you know, how often your ads are being seen? And I think that's kind of also where the real value of lifecycle marketing can be seen, where you can break down the reporting and the data and the insights. And, you know, ultimately asking the right questions will very quickly remove partners that, you know, might not be as trustworthy. Yeah, and just to add, you know, programmatic may be really complex, but it is extremely valuable, you know, when you get it right with the right partner.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks, Laura. All good things to be considering for retailers who are watching this back. Jessica, what tips do you have for brands to implement brand safety? How does focusing on media quality help brands to maximize their ad spend?
Yeah, so first and foremost, when it comes to brand safety, it's really important to distill what is safe and what is not safe for your brand, which seems pretty simple, but to really sit down and think about it. If you do not have a media quality strategy in place, I would encourage you to speak to your teams, even bring in risk and compliance and other internal teams to model out scenarios with your brand across different types of content and different environments, and kind of go through what's okay, what's not okay. And from there, you're developing a plan to mitigate brand risk, but you also need a response plan if you do incur brand risk. So there are a number of instances where brands have been called out on social media by activists, like Sleeping Giants, for example. And so having a plan of what would you do if your brand was called out, that's really important. So this brand safety framework needs to be communicated internally, externally to your partners, agencies, anyone who's trading on your behalf, to ensure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to your unique brand safety framework. James alluded to it before, but publishers and journalists aren't tasked with writing brand safe articles. They're writing articles that we as people of society really should read. And so it's really up to the brand to implement technology that enables them to buy brand safe and suitable. I mentioned it before, we have another study called the Halo Effect, which actually measured brain activity. And it showed that being in an unsafe and unsuitable environment actually decreases those metrics like memorability, favorability, and engagement. And actually, there's a great example now of Yay, artist previously known as Kanye West, where brands are pulling their endorsements and partnerships because of the risky comments and the impact of the potential fallout that could have on their brand. So it's really the same thing when it comes to media buying and brand safety. You put your money in environments that will shine a positive light on your brand because it builds brand equity.
I think that's really important, and maybe some of the brands on here haven't experienced some of those types of environments, but I specifically, if I just share briefly, a couple of key moments that I've had throughout my career. One was when I was working with Kathmandu, and there was a lot of backlash of being called out around ethical plucking of animals. We weren't contributing to that, but that was definitely a moment that we had to be very careful around that, the brand safety, and also how we address that directly on social. And then I also had two issues when I was with Forever New. One was only 2 weeks into the job, and Rana Plaza, the tragedy that happened in Bangladesh. And then there was a Four Corners expose, followed up then by the real highlight around animal treatment and ethical mohair, and how Angora it was actually. So sometimes there are things that we don't even predict are going to happen to us, but that piece around being proactive, bringing in all of those specialists across the business to be able to think about those alternatives that you hope don't happen, but you always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So I think just to share a couple of examples from our own region where I personally have had to deal with those scenarios, hopefully makes people understand how relevant and important that part of this conversation is. Bronte, just jumping back to you now, if we can talk a bit about Miss Amara, how is your team maximising their media ad spend?
Yes, I'd love to talk about that in the context of November, because as we all know in retail, November is sales season, and there is a lot of planning that goes into place to making sure we execute this correctly. You really have one chance. We know that there's a lot of brands that with bigger budgets than ours are going to really be competing for those CPMs at that peak period at the end of this month, and those CPMs are going to rise. We may not be able to wear that rise easily as the bigger brands, so we have to go really smart about it. We plan this months ahead to have stages where we're approaching people top of the funnel, warming them up through brand advertising, running lead gen competitions, exposing them to our welcome flow emails to understand the brand and our services that we offer. Then we're going to start running our sales earlier this year than we've done previous years, and we're going to be really clear about it. This is the biggest sale of the year, so you're going to get the best offer now. It allows us to buy our media more cost effectively in the mid period of the month, and we'll put the bulk of our budget then, not too much, but not it doesn't mean we're no longer at risk of achieves or not achieves at the last weekend of the year. So we'll stagger that nicely, and we'll see how we perform up to the end of the month. We know that you can overspend quite easily on the Black Fridays. Your CPMs are going to go up really high, but we're absolutely doing a lot of work to make sure we are still profitable. We're looking at discount levels. We're looking at how much we can spend, making sure that we maintain our minimum ROAS. It's really important for us that this is a successful campaign. It's not just a campaign where we've got a lot of sales, but not made a lot of money. It needs to absolutely be a profitable campaign. So it goes all the way from planning out those discounts to planning out that media, and making sure that ROAS comes in the door to make sure it works for the business so we can run it all again next year.
Really good, timely advice there. Thanks, Bronte. James, what about your team at WooliesX? What areas are you looking to maximise media spends?
It's kind of like a point Jess made before, but I think one of the key things at the moment is that the other reason why you want to make sure that you've got a relationship with an IS or the key vendors who provide the tools you're using for measurement is, first of all, if you're moving your account between agencies, you've got the historical view of what's been going on, but also that historical view when we're planning, especially internally, is really key, because we can look at that from, say, last year, previous months, previous quarters, and use the learnings of that to plan what we're doing in the future. I think there's a load of really basic questions. I know I kind of feel like I sound really boring when I say this, which is like, is it brand? Is it performance? What are we actually trying to achieve? I mean, we've all worked a number of times when we're looking at various campaigns where there's a bit of mixed messaging in what we're actually trying to do. Are we trying to move product, or is it a case of we're trying to build brand? Because obviously they're doing very different things and require different media, different settings. the settings around the campaign again. So for example, viewability, non-human traffic, what are you trying to do? What's your comfort level are really important. All businesses here will be looking at more and more looking at a customer first approach in how we talk to people. So understanding that customer, understanding their sensitivities, be they younger, older, is really, really important. And you can use tools like IAS to kind of manage that more effectively. And then a kind of bit like Bronte said, to be honest with you, time of year when you've got your big periods, you've got to look at your buying strategies to make the most of the opportunities that are there. I know most people look at Woolworths and probably think it's kind of a bit like a money gun at times, but in reality, we have to use our budgets efficiently, especially in the economic climate we're in, to find the customer in the right place at the right time and sort of take them on that journey. And also look at the life cycle of what we're trying to do with the product. You know, it's like we've got, you know, you've got things like milk or things like that people buy 2-3 times a week. They're gonna have a far higher you know, things like that, we're going to market them in a far different way to things that are bought once a quarter, or things that maybe a larger purchase through our e-com businesses or things like that. So I think there's a huge number of factors that go into there, but that customer-centric approach, understanding the customer, looking to find the customer where they are, and then making sure that it's a human audience, the viewability is good, we're not around content that we don't want to be there, are really, really key. And to be honest, coming back to the comment from before about why you work with the bigger, you know, the established partners in this field, and this is their level of expertise. If you look at over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, some of the things that have happened here with the weather, you know, a number of different things, that ability to in real time alter the content mix based on what's happening in the news cycle or what's going on are really, really important. When we also look at, say, things in the news like, you know, Kanye West, Ye, kind of having a mind explosion or whatever is going on, there's certain things around there that maybe 5-6 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago we might have looked at doing stuff around, whereas now we don't. So it's a very, very fluid market, and I just think you've got to be using the tools you have to be focused on what's going on and not being afraid to kind of optimize or change the kind of thrust of what you're doing in real time to find the audience.
Yeah, I think that real-time reactivity is really powerful. We don't have, you know, 24 hours to wait for somebody to come back and be able to action those changes. But also, I think, James, that must be quite an interesting shift for you guys around some of those more short-time consumables. When you added the marketplace items, you're probably learning a lot more about different categories as you're expanding your range and how you sell those, I would guess.
And also, we don't want to be marketing products that we haven't got in store.
Yes.
So a lot of the kind of geo-targeting, a lot of those things are really important for us, because like the worst thing that can happen for us is, you know, you want to delight the customer. You know, if you go in to buy milk, you want to have milk there. I know it's a very basic way of looking at it because there's normal there, but like, you know, especially during COVID and things like that, that ability to reflect what you had in the store was really, really important for the customer experience.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm conscious of time. I'm going to jump to a couple of questions that we've had from the audience now, if that's okay. So the first one's for James. Do you have a case study example of a diverse campaign that really worked?
Yes, but I probably can't talk about it. So it's like, I mean, I think, yeah, I think that the thing about Woolworths that is truly amazing is just how focused we are on the customer. And I think that the customer is the key to what you're doing and understanding that customer. So I think the key thing is, if you have a diverse campaign, whatever it is, it's understanding who you want to talk to, understanding where they are on the internet and what they're doing. And I think for some brands, that's kind of, you know, quite an interesting conversation. You know, I was like at a Pinterest thing recently and talking to the team there. And if you look at, say, talking to people and what they're doing, when you look at those more diverse campaigns, you've got to understand where those people are, what they're doing, and where they're consuming media, because the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. And then I think you have to be really, really focused on making sure you're looking at what's happening with the campaign, how it's performing, where it's performing, what's working well. Now, I know as a large business with a strong rewards program and everything else, we're very, very fortunate because we can have a good understanding of what the customer is doing. But those kind of key insights into who they are, where they want to be, are really key. And I think what's very difficult for a lot of businesses then is kind of, as a marketeer, you know where that person is and you know why you need to talk to that person. It's often very, very difficult, especially when you're looking at a diverse audience, to sell that in to the CMO or most senior people, because they're a bit like, oh, I'm a bit uncomfortable about this, or I'm not sure about that, or I'm not sure what we're doing with this. So I think it's more about that understanding of the customer, and then your ability to effectively explain why that strategy is going to work, and then using the tools you have in real time to monitor the campaign and make sure it's achieving what you want it to achieve.
Absolutely love that. Anything that comes back to the heart of what we do should be around the customer. So
yeah.
Wonderful. The next question.
The other thing I was going to say is, and if you've done the research, my pet hates when people haven't done the research, just to get it out there. If you've done the research, like, fight your corner. Because very often what you'll find is sometimes you're being challenged because someone just wants to make sure you're actually certain about the why, do you know what I mean? So you're not just like shooting from the hip. But secondly, sometimes people just haven't thought of it in that way, because people can take it very much, well, that's always been the customer for this product. Yeah. If you look at, say, if you look at the trends that are happening in makeup and things like that, if you went down the route of this is what people have always done, you would miss a large part of the market that's growing at the moment. So you've got to be kind of open-minded, and like, again, that customer focus gives you that.
Love that. Great, thanks, James. The next one's more for the wider panel, but how are you measuring success and utilizing data capture around peak to help in the future? There's so much data captured, it's overwhelming. So maybe Bronte, if I throw to you first.
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we have been planning out this peak period for a while, and we are reusing that data we collect. So we've been running a lot of video view campaigns, so building up that brand awareness. Those video viewers all then be going into a remarketing pool. We have a lead gen campaign. We are building up a lot of email leads. They will all go into a funnel to be targeted. Then we have our conversion campaigns and our remarketing campaigns, and they all make use of existing data. Sometimes it is just that we just know who they are and we can retarget with a message. Sometimes we have some more information about browser intent or interest in a style. So we can, serve them emails or product ads that suit what they have interest in. So we do heavily rely on building out that pool of data and then really focusing in when we go for that activation message at the end of the month.
James, is there anything else you'd like to add?
We obviously have a very, very data-driven approach to how we do a lot of our media. I just think the key thing is it's like focusing on what your key, like the key performance indicator, the key deliverables are, because it's always easy to say it's just sale, which to be honest, very often is what I would say. But like, it's also important to understand what they're doing and also understand the product lifestyle of what you're working with. 94% of the population shops in Woolworths. People come in, which always surprises me, 2 to 3 times a week. But then when you actually think about it, quite often it's quite shocking, because you're like, actually, I do go in 2 to 3 times a week. So it's understanding that customer journey, but also what you're trying to do. If you look at, say, I don't know, clothes washing powder, your sales cycle is probably like 30 to 45 days. If you're looking at, say, milk or something like that, it's probably like 3 days. So, it's understanding the customer, then also looking for what those key things that tell you that you're having success or not having success, and also the type of product. Because if you've got something that is basically it's a staple, people are going to consume that in a very different way to something that's, say, a luxury, or something that's more of a kind of decision to buy to treat yourself or something like that.
Yeah, and I can guess that your peak's probably a little bit different from Miss Amara or Myer. You probably don't, you probably get a lot of special buys and things like that this time of year.
Yeah, and it also depends on the business. Like, for our e-com business, it would be, this is the tricky thing about with Woolworths. The e-com business, it's a very, very different thing where we're selling higher ticket items.
Yeah.
Than as in like, Woolworths Marketplace and things like that. Than it would be for the supermarkets where we're selling everyday staples. And, we've just gone through Halloween based on my turbocharged children who crashed all of yesterday. The massive over amount of sweets that they ate before we gave anyone to anyone else. We will be shifting a huge amount of confectionery in the last week. So a lot of it's things that sit outside of that sales cycle as well, where you're reacting to what's going on.
Yeah, great. Okay, last open question from the audience. Where's the future of programmatic advertising heading? Maybe Laura, I'll start with you. on your thoughts?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess, first of all, with, that question around, capturing and utilizing data, when we talk about data, we kind of talk about three things. And the first thing is privacy legislation, making sure, that the advertising is consented. Obviously, there's kind of upcoming changes with the government. The second one is around targeting solutions. So, to James's point, how do you find, the right person in the right channel, wherever they are, without third-party cookies, and making sure that you're kind of working with a partner who does have a targeting solution. And then that kind of ties into attribution as well, and kind of looking at, how do you measure the success of your campaign without being able to kind of consistently target the same user. And in terms of the future of programmatic, we kind of talk about connected media. So, the ability to be able to target people across multiple channels, with an ID solution that kind of works across all of those channels in a cookieless solution. So that's kind of where we really see the future. And then beyond that, also kind of closing the loop between online and offline, which is, something that everybody's kind of working towards as well.
Great. Jessica, would you like to add anything into that thought?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll look at it from a media quality lens, and where I see it heading is really around efficiency. So if we take the operational part of programmatic, so the application or using the actual tools for programmatic, where we see it going is to be far more automated. Obviously, that's where programmatic came from, and we're slowly, actually quite quickly now, moving towards a world where every vendor that plugs into the programmatic ecosystem it's far easier to apply that vendor's technology, because automation is really being built into all the processes. So it's great in that sense. And then when we look at the efficiency from the trading side of programmatic, what we're seeing is, first and foremost, we're all now coming together to buy quality media. The next step is to buy quality media efficiently. So what I mean by that is understanding all your supply paths, the platforms that you're buying from and the platforms that are part of the programmatic supply path, and making sure that you're optimizing to efficient pathways. So yes, you've ticked the box of getting quality media, which is fantastic. Now, the next step for the future of programmatic is making sure you're doing that in efficient ways and minimizing the amount of supply paths to achieve that impression.
James and Bronte, do you have anything you want to add on the future of programmatic advertising, or maybe even some of the challenges that you have that you hope that it will solve for you in the future?
Bronte, you want to go first, or?
Sure. I was thinking around, there is more walled gardens now, and the biggest media places, and then we're talking News Corp, Facebook, Google, have their own walled gardens. So we have to sometimes work within those limitations. But there is enough offering there that we can, achieve what we want, to find that person, to serve them that message. It's going to be an interesting time to see how things change, how the legislation changes. There are going to be challenges. So we're going to have to be, as Jessica said, we're going to be really careful, not only media efficiency, media quality, but making sure that it's hard, it's difficult. We want to be effective with what we're doing. We want to prove the value of each thing we do, and it needs to be incremental. So we're going to have to use things like marketing mix modeling, which is channel agnostic, to measure, was that channel the thing that made the difference? Because we might have 7 or 8 channels running, and it's very hard to know if we needed to run all of those to get the sale, or was 6 or 5 enough? So we're going to have to do things like that to kind of do this measurement.
Sorry, you finished? Oh, yeah, cool. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I think it's something really important to think about here is when you look at the programmatic landscape, the challenge, a lot of this is being driven by privacy, but the challenge of what's happening at the moment is it is beneficial to the larger businesses that can invest in the technology to do this. And it's not a very easy thing to say. I think it's the unforeseen circumstance of people like, the drive for privacy, often driven by people like Apple, that they're the ones who are going to benefit the most from this, or the Googles or people like that. So I think that when you look at your scale as a business, I would argue that, and I don't know, Bronte, what your views would be on this, because like some of this, when you're looking at the small, medium-sized businesses, you benefit from riding off the back of that technology from programmatic media. because the way they're building those algorithms, the way they're building that stuff is off a lot of the activity that's probably happening with competitors, happening with that, and you're the beneficiary of what's going on with that. When you're a larger business, you're not the beneficiary of what's going on with that because you're the one who's generating a lot of that data. I think that when you look at the walled gardens rising, and when you look at what's happening, that's why utilizing trusted partners like a Crimtan or utilizing tools like IAS to manage your media is more and more important, because you've got less ability to do that yourself, which is what you had in the past. And so I think the key thing to think about is what you need to be asking yourself is, it's not like the classic, what can I do for my country? It's more like, what can the product do for me? So if you're dealing with like a Google, you're dealing with News Corp, you're doing something like that, they've got proprietary first-party data that you can use to target. Unless you're a large organization or you have a large loyalty program, you're probably going to benefit from the ability of utilizing those products. And programmatic within those walled gardens has got a very strong future, because really you're leveraging their insights on their audience to deliver media more effectively. Everyone's learned from Google and Facebook, the more effectively you do that, the better it comes. But the other challenge is you need to be aware, because we've gone through a period of the last 10 years where it's been very static between like really Google and Facebook as the two main players in this. And then you've had like interlopers like Snap, Twitter, depending on your brand comfort. More and more, you're seeing TikTok coming in really strong. From the C-suite of businesses, that's probably quite challenging, because they're used to a lot of these companies coming out of North America rather than China, Singapore in the case of TikTok. And I also think that, again, you're going to have to work with those walled gardens separately. And I think that's the one shame, that this thing that you had before, where effectively the brand was empowered by using cookies or using their first-party data to drive complex marketing programs really effectively, that's kind of been taken away by what's going on. So then it's more about picking the partners you're going to work with, so that within a walled garden like a Meta or a TikTok or Google, you can use something like IAS to look at the screen for human traffic, check for viewability, all that sort of stuff, set to your brand guidelines, or using trusted partners to say, well, okay, look, you work with maybe globally 1,000 businesses like us. What can we use in that way? What can Crimtan help me do in that way to drive my business moving forward? Because unfortunately, the investment level to set up the equivalent of WooliesX is really, really high. So unless you're a business who's got the scale and the wherewithal to do that, it's going to be very, very hard to kind of compete with kind of how that works.
That's great. I just want to thank everybody. That was a really robust and interesting conversation. In my role at Myer, I'm not responsible for programmatic, so I've been a little bit out of touch, but even I've learned a lot today, which I'm very grateful for. So Bronte, James, Jessica and Laura, thank you very much for joining me today. And to everyone else on the line, I hope you also got a lot out of this session. Thanks, everyone.